In product image retouching for online stores, it's really important to align images in a precise and fast manner. Unfortunately, Photoshop doesn't offer us anything to help. You can use the image size, canvas size, fit image commands, you can crop, you can transform, all that by yourself, of course. But when you have to retouch a few hundred images in a single working day, and they all have to be aligned in the same way, doing it manually is one of the most tedious and boring things you can imagine. Well, not anymore. Forget about manual transformations or tons of clumsy actions. With the system I devised, you can align anything, objects, mannequins, flat lace, on a white background or not, in just a second and with just a single step in history. When I have objects isolated on white without a shadow, I want to align them automatically, no matter what their initial proportions are. I want them to fit some specific parameters like the image size, margins, orientation. And I also want to have control over the alignment process so that I can quickly realign any image if I don't like its position in the frame. When I have objects isolated with a shadow, I want the shadows to stay out of the margins. I don't want them to get in the way of the alignment. And I also want to be able to stick objects to the bottom margin or the top margin if I need to, instead of just centering them all the time. When I have objects that are not isolated, I want them to be aligned automatically too, and quickly. And of course, I absolutely need to be able to quickly change the desired image size, margins, width, and the object's orientation within those margins. Now it's time to learn how all that is possible. Let's start with the first set from the pack, which is called Align Trim. As the name implies, this set of actions will help you align images by trimming. There's the trim command in the image menu, and if you have an object isolated on white, you can trim the background around it away. That's exactly what the script does, and the resulting image is aligned using the parameters defined by the user. To change the parameters, run the first action in the set, which is called Set Parameters. You'll get a window full of settings that you should change. When you run it for the first time, it will be quite empty. You should change that. Width and height are the aligned image full width and height. PPI is 72 by default, but you can change that. As for the margins, the next 4 input fields specify how far the object should be from the image edges, that is, how wide the margins should be. They don't have to be the same width, of course, it's totally up to you. The last thing is the orientation drop-down menu. Use center if you want your objects to be centered, up or down if you want them to stick to the respective margins, either the top or the bottom. Mannequins are often aligned to the top margin. Objects like shoes and bags are often aligned to the bottom margin, so it might come in handy. It's not necessary to fill all the input fields, just don't forget the width and height. Margins can stay 0, of course, and if you don't choose something from the orientation menu, the script will just center everything. When you're finished, press Save and all the settings will be saved to a text file on your desktop. Then you can use the Close button or just press Escape to close the window. That's it. Make sure your image is flat before you run the Align via Trim action. If it's not flat, the action will flatten it anyway. Then it will trim the image and align it on a white background according to the settings you've just specified. The action can be used to align all the isolated objects that don't have a shadow automatically, and if trimming is not appropriate, the user can use a rectangular selection to show how exactly the image should be aligned. Like when you have a mannequin like this one with some strings hanging far below. With the default trimming mechanism, it gets aligned so that the strings touch the lower margin. But if we need to emphasize the mannequin instead, we should show the script how to align the image. To do it, undo the alignment first, it's just one step in history anyway. Then use the Marquee tool to make a rectangular selection of what exactly has to be fit within the margins. Run the action and it will do it just the way you need it. If there's a selection anywhere in the image, the script will use it for alignment, but if there's no selection, the image will be trimmed instead. Make sure the isolation is done well and there is no trash on the background. It doesn't matter if you can see it well or not, but even if there's a tiny dot somewhere, the trimming process will fail. If that happens, undo the alignment, find whatever is out there and erase it, then run the action again. That's it. Now let's move on to the next set in the pack. It's called Align Alpha, and Alpha means alpha channel. In Photoshop, if you want to save a selection, that's what you're going to use, an alpha channel. In product image retouching, this is exactly what lets us align images isolated with a natural shadow. If you wonder why we can't just use the trim-based alignment method, that's why. Because when there's a shadow under the object, you can't trim the shadow away and it will get in the way of your alignment. If I try and run the trim-based action on this image, you will see that the object is located too high and its bottom doesn't reach the bottom margin. We can only align this image with the trim-based action if we use a selection instead. But isn't that tedious, making selections manually all the time? Sure it is. That's why there's the alpha channel-based alignment method. Here's how it works. But before you watch whatever follows, make sure you're acquainted with the isolation methods that I use and especially the isolating actions I use. There's manual isolation and there's automatic isolation, and there's a lot of information on my website about all that, so I'll keep it really short. The idea of alpha channel-based alignment is this. When we isolate images on white with a natural shadow, we make a selection of the background, and if you invert that selection, you get a selection of the object. If we have a selection of the object at some point, why not save it and reuse it later when we need to align it? This is how it works. We select the background around the object. We make sure that the shadow is also included in the selection. As we're pushing our objects down to the lower margin, it's important that the lower part of the selection includes all the shadow and doesn't include the object. It doesn't matter how exactly you get this selection, but when you have it, you run the isolating action that modifies it to make the edges nice and smooth. It fills the selection with white, and then it saves the selection into an alpha channel. Then you use the history brush to restore the shadow, and you also retouch the object if it has any flaws. And in the end, when everything's done, it's time to align the object. The Align Alpha set has two actions, and one of them is used to save parameters, just like the trim-based aligning pack. You run the set parameters first, set it all up, and press Save. Then you run the second action, which is called Align via Alpha. What it does is very simple. It loads the selection from the alpha channel, which has to have a specific name, which is MCH. It is created by all my isolating actions, and you can make one too. It's just the name you use when you run the Save Selection command. So if there's an alpha channel called MCH, the script loads it and uses it to align the image according to the parameters you've specified. Now the object is sticking to the margins, while the shadow is out of the margins, which is exactly what we need. This method allows to retouch product images really fast because it takes care of the alignment process. You have to select the background to isolate these shoes anyway, so why not use the selection for alignment as well? Replace the background with a white solid color, restore the shadow underneath, and run the action. It's as easy as that. Even easier if you use my actions for automatic isolation and shadow restoration, but that's another story. Just like the trim-based action, alpha channel-based alignment is not possible when there's some trash on the background. If you missed a dot or two, it will be recognized by the script as a part of the object. If that happens, go back in history exactly one step, erase whatever is there. The script will correct the selection automatically and it will align the image properly. If you need to align an object in a particular way, you can always make a selection and run the same action. It will use the selection instead of the alpha channel. It's especially useful when you want the object to stick out of the margins. Now let's move on to the last set of actions from the alignment pack. This one is called edge detection, and there are 3 actions in the set. They all do exactly the same thing, just a bit differently. What they do is select the object on a relatively consistent background. It's a crude selection, of course, and the only reason why you want such a messy selection is when you need to align the image without isolating it. You can make a selection manually, of course, but why bother if you can do it automatically? Just run one of the 3 actions. I would recommend the high pass or the find edges, as they are the fastest. After that, run any of the alignment actions, be it align via trim or align via alpha, because they handle selections in the same way. If the object is white but relatively contrasted with the background, it will be selected with no problem at all. However, objects blending with the background won't be selected properly, as there is no magic in Photoshop, just math and programming. But this is exactly what gives us the opportunity to speed up the workflow, at least when you don't have to waste time on stretching and transforming images to align them.